We have a really great panel with three different perspectives on making community living a reality. Ricardo and Donna Thornton are self-advocates, and they're joining us from Ricardo's workplace, the Martin Luther King Jr. Library, where Ricardo has worked for more than 40 years. And Ricardo's going to share his experience of moving from Forest Haven to the community, but more important, building a great life in the community. Jenny Lengyel, the president of TASH, is also a provider who has done a fantastic job of making community inclusion a reality. And she's going to talk about the challenges of supporting people to live their vision of a desired life. And finally, our honoree, Michael Lottman, will share his perspective of how to move a whole service system. As a court monitor and special master, how he has been able to work with bureaucracies to create, not just to get people out of institutions, but to create meaningful community services for people. And before I turn it over to Ricardo and Donna, I want to share a couple of experiences that I've had. One was years ago during implementation of the court orders in Pennhurst, in the Pennhurst litigation, when everybody decided that the service system in Philadelphia really sucked and it was time to try to change it. So we had a big gathering and a facilitator, and we started out by identifying the things that were most important to us. And then we went on to try to translate that into a system of supports for people with disabilities. And the things that we identified that were most important to us were family, friends, a good job, loving relationships, good health, and spirituality. And it occurred to us after we did that, that if we had set out to identify some of the things that people living in the community, in the receiving services in Philadelphia, if we had set out to identify the things that people don't have, but should have, we probably would have come up with the same list. The flash forward to last year, when I represented a young lady who was receiving home and community-based services under the participant-directed option of our home and community-based waiver in Pennsylvania. And she was awarded damages by the court for the deliberate indifference of the county service system. What was that deliberate indifference? We usually think of deliberate indifference as some horrific kind of abuse, but it was, the judge found that the system was so convoluted and impossible to navigate that she couldn't get services that she needed, despite being in an almost ideal situation with parents who were excellent advocates. So that's the tension, I think, between our vision of what people should have and the reality of too many service systems. So with that, I'll ask Ricardo and Donna to speak. Ricardo and Donna met each other at Forest Haven, moved to the community, and I think are living a really good life. And I'd like to ask them how that happened, what they wanted for themselves when they left Forest Haven and how they were able to make it happen and what were some of the barriers in the way. So Ricardo?
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Still learning this computer. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I'm here with my Donna.
Yeah.
So the question what was your question again, Judy? Just want to make sure.
Yeah. When you moved from Forest Haven to the community, what was your vision of the kind of life you wanted, and how were you able to make it happen?
Well, it was really Donna's dream. Donna, who I met at Forest Haven, we both from Forest Haven. It was your dream about the swing, right? You want to tell a little bit about that real quick?
The swing?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. When I used to be down in Forest Haven, I used to always go down in the ball field. And I used to love to go down there and swing on my swing. And I always, talk about when I'm going to get out in Forest Haven, when I'm going to leave Forest Haven, when we are going to get out, when I'm, and then I would talk about when I'm going to get a job, when I'm getting, and then I would talk about other things like getting married, having children, getting married, getting a job, having a family, other people, getting out the community, having a house, doing other things that other people, like, the staff, other people doing in real life, and, and other things, like having a real life like other people, other than that, yeah.
She's ready today, Judy. She's ready. Yeah, but getting living in an institution and was a challenge for us. Each of our cottages, our buildings had named after trees. If you have the maple tree, you have the maple cottage. If you have an oak tree, you have oak cottage.
Magnolia.
You have magnolia. So there were girls on one side, guys on the other side, and the thing that kind of really amazed me was that I had family down there that I didn't even know. And I got a chance to meet with my brother, William, my sister, Earlene, and all of us lived there, but we were kind of like, I was one that probably was distant because I was in another institution, but we finally got a chance to relate. I got to relate to my sister, Earlene. I loved her. But I was always trying to figure out why some days she was happy and some days she was just overdosed with medication that just was too much. But she passed in the institution, and I said I would advocate for change. That's why today I advocate, because I want to see people out of institutions and living in a community where they won't have to worry about overdose. They can worry about being proud of who they are.
Ricardo, the things that Donna talked about what you wanted for yourselves when you moved to Forest Haven, were you able to make that happen?
Donna got a beautiful apartment, and I was able to come to visit her and help and try to be a handyman around her beautiful apartment, right, honey? And one day she proposed to me. And she asked me about marriage, and I told her I wasn't going to get married till I'm about 65. And she said, by that time, nobody going to want you. I won't keep it clean. But it was a nice proposal, right, honey? Okay. But we were able to go and then take that to our caseworkers, and that was a thing that really, no, that's not going to happen. You just got out of an institution. Let's just get adjusted to something like that. So they were against it at first. We went on and we went on and pursued it. We did get married because there was so many negative things about the disability community, and we wanted to show people what we can do. You know, I'm working, my wife working, and we just wanted to kind of show the community, stop looking at the negative side of things that we just can't do and we are unable to do, but let's look at the side what we can do if you give us a chance.
So you have a family too.
Yeah, we have a I had a 2-pound baby boy. His name was Ricardo Jr. And now he's working. Well, he's not a boy. He's not a baby boy no more. He's my baby boy. But now he got his own children now. He got children now. He got his own children, and I'm a grandparent now.
But they call her honey. I like honey better. I like the word honey.
Yeah, and this is grandpa.
No, not grandpa.
And they call me honey. They call me honey. I am honey, grandma honey.
So what is amazing with the story was that we were able to get married, and an article was in the Washington Post that was shown across the district, and some were opposed against, some were for it. But we had someone from Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes who came and did a story, documentary on us. And from there, he went out to the institution to see what was really going on. Some areas he couldn't go see, they weren't going to let him see.
Yeah.
Some areas he did see. So getting out, having them come and do an interview and see what was really going on. He told Donna, he said, "What, Donna?" And she just spoke about earlier about the dream she had about getting married, and all these were on her swing. And Mike said, "Well, you know what? Your dreams came true.
Yeah.
You got a beautiful husband, ain't that right?"
I got a husband.
Okay.
I have a son. I have we have a car. We had everything I wish for.
So we're now actually living independent living. So we really like that. We really like that life.
Yeah.
And we both advocate for others.
Yes.
Right?
Can't ask no more.
Thank you. And by the way, everyone, check the program book for everyone's biographies. But Ricardo was appointed by President Obama to the President's Committee on Intellectual Disabilities. So he's been able to have a national influence. Okay, let's turn to Jenny. Jenny, as a provider, you have been an exemplar of how to make community inclusion a reality for the people you support. Please tell us about the strategies you've used to do that. What are some of the barriers you've encountered in the community system, and how have you overcome them?
Thank you, Judy. I've been doing this work for about 30 years, and I was very, very fortunate that my first experience in wanting to help people with disabilities was an extremely positive one, in that I ended up kind of falling into an agency that was closing down group homes and helping people move into their own homes. So I was very fortunate to have my whole career now be about empowering people to live on their own. When I first started doing this, we just had this imperative: find apartments, find staff, get people out, we'll do the rest, we'll do the community building part after we get people out. And that's what we did. We found apartments, we found staff. And by finding staff, I mean helping people to interview their own staff so they could choose each person that walked into their home. For some people, that was an extremely novel idea. They had never been able to choose who was supporting them. They were told who supported them. And, you know, we did it. And then we would help people build community from there. Over the years, things have changed dramatically. And I can honestly say COVID probably brought about the biggest changes in how this works and how people can access the community. There's always been, you know, a challenge in finding the right housing. You know, we don't just find any apartment for just anybody. It has to be the right apartment for the right person. You know, is it near a bus line? Is it too noisy? Is it too many kids running around? Or is there not enough families running around and we need more? But, you know, we could find it. We could access it. And we were able to set people up in places where they really wanted to live, communities that they wanted to be in. And what we find today is that that is not always an option for people. They can't always live in the community of their choice, the community that they feel is home, because they can't afford to. Either it's unaffordable or it's inaccessible to their needs. And so one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now is housing. And one of the panelists that's going to speak later is a real expert on this. So Sheree, I hope I do a good job representing some of this. But the first big challenge we meet is finding someone a place to live that they can afford. And that is something where we are looking at some really out of the box ways to support people to find housing that they can afford. We recently were supporting a man who really needed to live in a house, and for his needs, the support he needed, the space he needed, and for the safety of people around him, it was really important that he live in a house that was not on top of neighbors. And we looked and looked and looked for over a year. And unfortunately, because of his situation, he had to live in a hotel for that year. It was the hotel or the institution, and we refused to let him go back to the institution. So we kept him in a hotel, which was, you know, a difficult year for everyone. As we moved on, we figured out we weren't going to find what we were looking for in the housing market that we deal with. I live in Washington State, which is, you know, getting increasingly expensive, especially near Seattle, which is where we are. And so we started thinking outside of the box. What else can we do? And we started approaching property investors. And we found this wonderful man who was willing to buy a house and then rent it back to the person we supported at the HUD rate of reimbursement. And so we learned something that day. What we learned was we used to do community building after the fact. Now we have to do community building before the person even goes to move. We have to start building their community from day one and helping to find ways that the community will step up and help someone to be a part, and get communities to say, yes, we're going to welcome this person in. Yes, we're going to do what it takes so that this person can live in this community. So housing has been one of the big issues, and you know, we continue. We've not only made friends with developers, but with, you know, property investors, and even with certain landlords that we know will have income-based properties, and you know, they call us first when something comes up, so that if someone, you know, is looking to live in a particular area, that may be an option for them. And we, you know, it's still all about the person's choice, but at least we're able to give them some options of where they could possibly live. The second biggest challenge, which used to be probably the easiest thing, is finding staff. For those of you that don't know, there is a huge crisis right now in the field of disability of finding people to provide support to individuals with developmental disabilities. It's the direct support crisis is nationwide, and finding people to do the work is becoming increasingly difficult. I can honestly tell you, 30 years ago, I never imagined that we would not be able to support people because we couldn't find people to do the work. Never. And today, there are times when we question whether or not we can support someone because we can't find the individuals to provide the support. And that's scary. That's a very scary piece of all of this. And that has a lot to do with the system, with the funding that we receive, the wages we're able to pay, but also it's just our society today. Something changed during COVID, and the work that we do is not considered as appeasing or happy. It doesn't make people as happy as it used to. So again, we had to shift. We had to look at how do we attract people? How do we find those people that want to do this for the right reasons, that want to make a commitment to build someone's life? And there've been lots of different ways. We are still, it's not perfect, but we definitely appeal to people based on the individual themselves. So instead of putting out, Total Living Concept is hiring, come work for us. It's, hey, we know this person named Matt, and Matt is really awesome. And here's the things that Matt loves. And here's the things that you would do when you were supporting Matt. And if this sounds interesting to you, give us a call. And what's amazing is that's what people are much more interested in, knowing what they're going to do and being a part of someone's life than getting a job. The job itself isn't appealing anymore. And if you read some of the ads out there, the jobs aren't appealing. It doesn't sound very good to do what we do sometimes, but really having to think about that individual and what that individual needs, and marketing that person, the wonderful person that they are, is the new way of attracting people into the work. And to me, it feels so much better when we're talking about one person, because we're trying to find the right people for each person. But again, it goes back to community also. It's one of our biggest successes was we did an interview with a young man, and this young man happened to be a part of a youth group from a very large church in our area. And as we were interviewing him, he started asking about kind of other people we supported and other jobs that we had within the agency. And we started to talk to him a little bit, and he says, well, I have this friend from youth group. And within the first 6 months of his employment, we ended up hiring 10 people from that youth group, all with different people we support, all doing different things, but being able to really build community within our community was the big piece. And again, it had to happen before we could ever move someone out. So our focus now is build community. As the executive director, I spend a lot more time just out meeting new businesses, getting out and meeting people in our local communities, and really making connections and finding ways that our communities and how we can contribute to the community so that the community wants to give back and wants to open up their arms and invite a person in. And so the job has changed dramatically in the time that I've been doing it, but it's wonderful. It's harder, which I never thought it could be, but some really amazing things are happening. And what we're seeing is people are able to move out, and they already have a stable foundation underneath them because the community is just opening their arms to invite them in already. And so for moving forward, we're going to have to continue to do this, because the money that the system pays for us to do what we do is never going to be sufficient to make it work alone. We need resources that money can't buy, which is communities that accept people that want to be a part of this this movement for civil rights for individuals and see that as an imperative and want to contribute in some way.
Jenny, what have you found for people to do during the day? Do most of the people you support have jobs?
Many have jobs, and we are very fortunate in Washington. Just passed legislation in starting July 1st. People can have a job and do what they call community inclusion, which is help basically build a life. They can receive those services at the same time, which was not true before July 1st. You could either get a job or have a life. You couldn't do both, at least not with getting any support to do that. So now you can do both. So we support a lot of people who have jobs or own their own businesses, and then supporting people to just find what they love. And actually COVID helped us with that. When things went virtual, we were able to really help people explore on a much bigger scale what they love. And people found a lot more, activities that may not be local, but they found more out in the community when it was virtual. And now we're helping them transition into local stuff that they found that they loved on the virtual platforms. And some people are sticking with their virtual, groups, but a lot of people are helping, excited to now do it live. But that's one thing that I can actually say COVID helped us, because the virtual platform took some of the fear and trepidation away and allowed people to explore something without so much risk in their eyes. And now people are getting involved, everything from drumming circles to knitting clubs to gaming groups, exercise classes, just different things that they weren't ever involved in before, and now are happily out and doing and enjoying.
We have a question from Hezi to Jenny. It sounds like over the years, your organization's focus has shifted from a narrow notion of service provision to a broader notion of community organizing. Do you have a succinct way of describing that shift in focus and concrete to-dos that other organizations might put into practice to implement the more community-oriented approach that you've described?
Oh, for us, it really was about failing, and we were failing. We were failing the people that we were supporting miserably because we couldn't meet their needs. And so the turnaround was just, we have to do this differently. And, my initial mentor in this field, Jeff Stroley, had a method of doing things. And his thing was shoot first, ask questions later, or ask permission, or ask forgiveness later. And so that's one of the things I've used throughout my career. So what we started doing was just trying anything and seeing if it would work. Always keeping in mind the vision and values, and the people we support were the number one. So we never turned to anything that was pity-based or charitable or, in any way that would hurt the people we support, but really looking at what is it we can do? And we just kept asking that question. We can't do this, but what is it we can do? What is available to us? And some of the risks were everything from, just talking to random people, going and talking to land developers and to real estate investors was not an easy task, especially getting appointments just to sit with them. But we took those risks. So I think the first to do is take a risk, imagine the unimaginable, and do it. Don't talk about it, just do it. Because the more you talk about it, you'll talk yourself out of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a great answer. Okay, let's turn to Michael Lottman now. Michael, you've had vast experience as a court monitor trying to move complex service systems from institutional practices to community inclusion. You've worked to persuade state bureaucrats who are responsible for implementing court orders and consent decrees to not just get people out of institutions, but create high quality community services and supports. And we'd like you to tell us about some of the strategies you found effective to accomplish that and the lessons you've learned about how to move service systems. Thanks.
Well, that's take a big bite out of the apple and try and tackle that one. I wanted to say couple of things about my perspective of what we've been talking about. It certainly affects what you've asked, which pointing out how convoluted a service system has become. I'm not directly involved, obviously, as much as I used to be, but I can't figure out how you attack this system. You have a provider, you have managed care agency, you have this state agency, that state agency, you have games being played with funding, so you don't even know what program you're in or what the requirements are that you can hold people to, and finding how somebody in the community in some kind of program, if they have a problem or they have a need for something else, how do they know where to go? Who can give that to them? I wouldn't know where to start. We had a thing here, Medicaid, block grant Medicaid programs. It just was bizarre. Instead of, asking for the amount of money you need to give people the services they need, the point of this was to spend as little money as possible, and then the state would get to keep half of the savings, quote unquote, that they didn't spend, and the rest would go back to the government. That's bizarre. These people think it's their money. It's not. It's the money that belongs to the service recipients. If the service recipients weren't there, they wouldn't get any of this money. And then instead they come up with how they can, make money on the deal. I don't know. Fortunately, it was pretty shaky for a while, but apparently something's being done about it. That was the legacy of Donald Trump, one of many. Apparently something's going to be done about that. And then I just want to say about housing. Housing is just a terrible problem for us and for everybody. I mean, I can't believe the things every paper every day. What happens to homeless, or what do you call them, unhoused people, and there's so many committees and task force and what have you to deal with this issue, but they don't seem to be able to accomplish anything, and they don't seem to be able to commit enough money to the cause to really to do anything. And in fact, the states around here, they're passing laws to inhibit the development of affordable housing because people are afraid their precious suburbs might be invaded by the kind of people who live in affordable housing, and that's the last thing they want to see. Even in this little tiny town I live in, that's going on. I can't believe how this place has turned out. You can't find any kind of minority here, no matter how hard you look. And then, Ms. Markoff, I'm glad to hear the government is addressing the need for affordable housing, but we're long past the addressing stage. We have to do something. We're going to have some huge percentage of the population living under bridges. It's critical. And Miss Jennifer, I thought that was a beautiful job of talking about what needs to be done and talking how the obstacles to addressing them. Staffing is obviously a horrible problem. We've had findings by the state auditor year after year after year that this is a crisis, so something's got to be done about salaries for direct care staff. And supposedly under our system, if the auditor recommends something like that and the agency doesn't address it, they can be sunsetted, you know, and put in receivership or something. Well, the last time it came to a head, our advocates took the state agency side instead of our side. Also, that's not the kind of advocacy I'm looking for. So, you know, I think we have a long way to go on these issues, and I don't exactly see what we're going to do. But let me get to how do you motivate people to develop the kind of programs we want to see, and the people we serve want to see and want for themselves. I mean, for the Thorntons, you know, it shouldn't be. I'm sure that for the Thorntons to be able to do what they've done probably is a culmination of things people had to do over many years to get to the point where, you know, two people who love each other can just get married and, you know, do what everybody else does. But it took quite a while to get to that point. Obviously, we need to see more of that, and it shouldn't be so difficult. But anyway, I didn't really get these state agencies and providers and all to work together to develop decent programs for people. I mean, I hope I helped, but I didn't, when I started this out, I didn't have any idea how to do that. But I knew it was my job to help get people to do it. Obviously, you know, in say, well, the Pennhurst case, which I seem to be dwelling on these days, it definitely helps if you're going to try and do that, to have a good court order behind you and a judge who is willing to enforce it. And in Pennhurst and a lot of these other cases where we've been talking about or will be talking about, you know, the ground was laid for somebody like me to come in and try and enforce it. A lot of thought went into these orders, and I think it took some smarts to make use of them and put them together in the right way. And I think in most of these cases, we were very lucky to be able to do so. And I would say, you know, the first thing is everybody doesn't have a court order. And I'm kind of afraid that the kind of court orders we used to have are going to be few and far between. But there's got to be some kind of commitment. I mean, if it's not a court order, it's got to be an enlightened administrator or a legislative initiative or a people's initiative. Something's got to be driving the process in a direction that we want to go, or else, you know, we're just kind of wasting our time. We've got to have a direction, and I think in these cases, one way or another, we did. My particular job in Pennhurst was kind of the easy part. After the program had been developed and approved and presented to the individual and their family, then if they didn't like what they were offered, then we had an informal hearing where we try and sort out the objections and see if we couldn't resolve the objections and provide the person what they needed so that we could move on. And I think the beauty of that was, first, you couldn't just, you know, and I'm just talking about one case. It's probably done differently in every case, one way or another. That doesn't matter. It's just that these elements have to be in place somewhere, or I don't think you're going to get very far. I mean, really what it is, it's just one big quality assurance process that begins before the person even leaves their unsatisfactory place of living and really doesn't end It continues well after they move to the community. And of course, my job was not to have people come in and re-argue the case and have a bunch of lawyers taking us down the garden path. We had all kinds of people attending these hearings, but we didn't go into that. The case was decided, and our job was very specific. What do we need to serve this person and to meet the objections that that people have? And it's what I think Ms. Jennifer said. You got to do it one person at a time. There's no other way to do it. We used to have these gatherings really, where you'd have the person. I always insisted the person had to be there. A lot of times whoever had custody of the person didn't think the person should be there because they couldn't possibly understand what's going on. Well, we had a lot of people in those hearings that didn't understand what was going on. We'd have the person, hopefully we'd have the parent, a guardian, a representative. If they had a lawyer, that was good. We had a representative from the state. Yeah, the Panelists involved both the local county programs and the state. And we had a real problem at first because the state didn't seem to think they needed to be bothered with what happened in these hearings. I finally issued this order, which had no basis in law whatsoever, saying that I guess they call it regional director, had to attend every hearing until he came up with a plan for having the state representative. And they did their part eventually, but it took a little coaxing to get them to take things seriously. I mean, I found, going at things at the local level is going to the county program, going to the specific provider is more productive than fooling around with people in the central office. Because you'll get a lot of smoke blowing, but you probably won't get much accomplished. Like when in North Carolina, and I think in Tennessee too, we really fought we want to meet with the local program. We want to meet with the providers. We don't want to sit in the central office and just have a debate. That's not going to get us anywhere. We want to talk to the people that have to do this, and they were much more receptive. And I think in both of those cases, after a while, things got kind of political, and it got to be pretty tough going towards the end. And a lot of these cases sort of staggered to the end, and we did as well as we could, but you could see people weren't going to remain as receptive as they had been. But we'd have all these people, and the beauty of the thing was you'd have somebody there, at least the people who are going to do the program, somebody's going to be advocating in favor of the program. And if there was an objection, there would be somebody advocating against what they thought was wrong with the program, what needed to be fixed. So you had a good, there's pretty good assurance that you'll air all sides of the issue and not just platitudes. Get specific. What do we need to do? How can we get it done? And again, you can start off. I remember in one of my first cases anywhere, well, not mine, our cases in Connecticut, there really wasn't anything to work with. So we did about a 1.5-page checklist that we took, and when a placement was proposed, we took our little checklist and went out and see if that stuff was there. And that was, in Connecticut, that was enough. They really wanted to do the right thing. And most of the time, if we pointed out something that was a problem, it got addressed. So that's obviously an optimum outcome. But with this system, we had, of course, we had also in Panelists, which was ingenious, a special master in addition to a hearing master. And the special master would come into these hearings loaded. I mean, they knew all there was to know about the individual, and they had a pretty good idea what was being offered and what might be wrong with it. So, when we bring these people together, and basically among those people, we should have had all the information we needed to decide what do we need to do and how are we going to do it? And if there's missing information, somebody better go now and go find the answer, because we're going to resolve it all while we're here. And later on, we did that too for people who were, I forget what we called them. I think it was like people who would have been admitted to Pennhurst if admissions to Pennhurst were still allowed, something like that. That people were, being admitted to other kinds of institutions or state hospitals. And we really were in danger for a while of getting people out of Pennhurst and then looking around, and then, some of those people and a lot of other people would wind up in other institutions or in state hospitals or, places that were worse than where they started out. And we got the judge to give the hearing master the authority to hear those cases too. If there was a proposal to, place somebody in any kind of institution, it had to go through the hearing master. And we would sit there all day and figure out how can we avoid doing this to this person? Because what it means is, given the alternatives, people are going to wind up in the state hospital system, which is just about the worst fate for our people that can be imagined. And I don't think there were very many cases that we didn't come up with something if we sat there long enough. And there were cases where they said, well, we don't have enough money. The state didn't give enough money. So I said, okay, we'll come back tomorrow, bring your budget, and let's see if we can find some money. And that scared the hell out of them. They didn't want me messing around with budgets. So usually they found the money. And I like to use the example. When we looked at these programs, we looked at them closely. I mean, I had one hearing that went on and on about the shower heads and that were on the showers in the home. And it's funny because it was raised by a woman who was the head of this sort of pro-institution group, to be nice about it, in Pennsylvania. And when she realized people were going to move, she decided to become an advocate. And she was as good an advocate as anybody had, because she worried about shower heads. She worried about anything that concerned the individual and the family. And we got down to the shower head, and I just said, look, I don't know anything about shower heads. I'm leaving for 15 minutes, and you guys fight it out or flip a coin. I don't care. You guys have to decide this. I can't tell you what shower head to use. And, got taken care of. But it's really, yeah, well, the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm talking too long. The other thing is you've got to be able to assure people that there's a system there that they can depend on. You've got to assure people that you have a quality assurance system that protects people from abuse and neglect. You've got to make sure that these providers are getting enough money to be able to stay in business and to hire enough staff. And when people start hearing and reading in the paper that bad things are happening to other people, then you can't expect them to jump up and down when you propose for their person to move. I mean, I think they have a legitimate grievance. If you can't assure them that their placement is going to be secure, well, you have no business proposing anything. You need pre-placement review. You need some state administrator or somebody with authority to review plans for people. I mean, we had how many times we would see who signed off on the plan and go talk to them about what were you thinking? I mean, somebody would have a seizure issue, not a word in the plan about how do we address that. I mean, there would be obvious things that just weren't addressed. So, you got to get, if you don't have the plan right to begin with, you're not going to have a very good program. And then you've got to have something like our hearing process. It doesn't have to be that elaborate, or it can be more elaborate. Just do it. And then you have got to go back. I mean, I think going back like 30 days after the person moves is a necessity for everybody. And then you've got to go back for regular reviews. I mean, you don't stop. And then you've got to show that if you find something that needs to be fixed, you can fix it. If you can't demonstrate that, then you shouldn't be taking risks with other people's lives. So anyway, it can be done. I think the issues people are talking about, we've identified a lot of good issues. We haven't identified as many good solutions, and obviously we're going to have to work on that. We can't run programs without staff. It's like the airlines a couple of weekends. Well, yeah, you've got a reservation, but you don't have a pilot. But don't worry, we're training pilots. You should have one in a couple of years. So you just sit over there in the corner, and we'll tell you when we find one. I mean, that's what we're saying to people. We can't do that. So
Yeah.
anyway, we have a long way to go. We want. I say we've brought people out of the darkness into the light of day. It's not unusual to see kids with disabilities in the schools. It's not unusual at all to see that anymore. We've gotten rid of a lot of the congregate care facilities that people were stranded in for so long. But our obligation is to also give these people, when they move into what we call the real world, that they will have a safe and decent world to live in. And we're very far from that right now. We need, and addressing those problems like housing and segregation and all that, and just the adequacy of schools in general. I mean, our public schools are horrible. And I can't imagine they're much better for kids with special needs than they are for other kids. You just read the papers, read the test scores. My God, they're bragging because 35% of the kids are on track to in English language or in mathematics. 35%, that's good. And everybody accepts that.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've got
Yeah.
a big task ahead of us, and we've come a long way, and we'll go the rest of the way, but it ain't going to be easy.
I just wanted to mention that the hearing process that Michael presided over was ordered by the Third Circuit when the Pennhurst court orders went up on appeal. And it was a response to the families who wanted their sons and daughters to stay at the institution. And so the judge had ordered the institution closed and everyone placed in the community. And the Third Circuit modified that with some sort of due process for people. And that was, I think, a really narrow process that the court ordered. And it was Michael who turned it into what really turned out to be a meaningful quality assurance process and a forum in which people could get problems solved. So it emphasizes how important the people implementing the court orders are. Without the right people in place, with the right approach, the right understanding, the right values, it is much less effective. We tried to copy that same process in the Clover Bottom consent decree, and it was there, but it never worked. It never amounted to anything. Nobody ever used it. And in part, that was because the case became extremely political, with the families using their position in the lawsuit to lobby against community living, and the state, the turnover among state bureaucrats was quite considerable, and the state changed positions all the time, sometimes very passive aggressively supporting the pro-institutional parents. So yeah, as Michael said, it's complicated and we have a long way to go. Okay, so we are about out of time. There aren't any questions in the chat boxes or Q&A, but there has been a fascinating conversation going on about housing with Barbara Ransom in the chat box. So I would recommend everybody to take a look at that. So thanks very much to all the panelists, and I'll turn it back to Matt.
Thank you, Judith. I greatly appreciate your leadership. So I want to thank the panelists, Donna, Ricardo, Michael, and Jenny. You were tremendous in bringing this panel together. A few takeaways I got from this was that when it comes to community living, it takes partnerships and real commitment to find those real solutions, trying to get people fully integrated in the community. The other takeaway is that we still have a long way to go, and if we can do something about it. It's up to us to improve the quality of life for everybody around us. So those are the quick takeaways that I got from this panel. So I once again want to thank this panel for their leadership. We will now take a 15-minute break. Our next panel, the second panel, will be focusing on voting. The theme is using our voice, protecting voting rights, which is moderated by Hezzy Smith, and that will begin at 2:30 Eastern Time. And so I look forward to another great panel, and I will see you again at 2:30. Thanks a lot, guys.